night Madison Square Garden defied reality. What happened inside Madison Square Garden last night was not just another NBA playoff game. It was not simply an upset. It was not even just a comeback. It was one of those rare moments where the entire basketball world stops, rewinds the footage, checks the score again, and still cannot believe what it just witnessed. Because the New York Knicks were dead. Not struggling, not uncomfortable, dead. They were staring at a deficit so massive that most teams would have quietly accepted the ending, protected their bodies, and started thinking about the next game. The San Antonio Spurs were not just beating them, they were embarrassing them inside their own building, in front of a Madison Square Garden crowd that had slowly gone from loud to nervous to completely silent. And then everything changed. One mistake, one shift in energy, one superstar refusing to quit, one young team suddenly feeling the full weight of pressure, and one final touch at the rim that turned a basketball game into a piece of NBA history. This is the kind of night that does not disappear when the final buzzer sounds. It follows players into the locker room. It follows coaches into film session. It follows fans into every argument, every debate show, every comment section, and every group chat across the league. Because when a team blows a 29-point lead, people do not just ask what happened. They ask who broke first. They ask who talked too much. They ask who stayed calm. They ask who wanted the moment when everyone else was terrified of. And that is where this story becomes much bigger than the scoreboard. Victor Wembanyama, the most terrifying young talent in basketball, had a moment that felt powerful at first, but may have awakened the wrong opponent. De'Aaron Fox, one of the fastest and most gifted guards in the league, had the game sitting right in his hands with only seconds left. Jalen Brunson, the heartbeat of New York, turned pressure into fuel. And OG Anunoby found himself in the exact place where legends are made. By the time this night was over, the Spurs were left searching for answers, the Knicks were celebrating a miracle, and NBA players around the league were reacting like they had just seen something that should not be possible. So before we break down how this collapse really happened, drop where you are watching from in the comments right now. If you believe no NBA game is truly over until the final buzzer, type 1. If you think the Spurs gave this one away, type 2. And if you want more NBA stories with this kind of drama, pressure, and behind-the-scenes emotion, make sure you subscribe, because what happened next is where this entire night turned from a blowout into absolute madness. The Spurs looked absolutely unstoppable. If you only watched the first half of this game, you would have laughed at the idea of a comeback. Seriously, nobody inside Madison Square Garden believed the Knicks were about to pull off anything special. Not the fans, not the analysts, not even some of the people sitting on the New York bench, because what San Antonio was doing didn't look human. From the opening tip, the Spurs played with a level of confidence and precision that completely sucked the life out of one of the loudest arenas in basketball. Every possession looked organized, every cut had purpose, every pass arrived exactly where it needed to be, and every shot seemed destined to find the bottom of the net. These weren't lucky bounces. These weren't desperation heaves beating the shot clock. The Spurs were generating quality looks and knocking them down with the calm confidence of a veteran championship team. Three-pointer, another three, then another, then another. At some point, disbelief replaced frustration. Madison Square Garden fell silent as San Antonio connected on an almost impossible stretch of shooting. 14 consecutive three-pointers. Think about that for a second. 14 straight shots from beyond the arc in a playoff environment, on the road, against a desperate home crowd. Even elite NBA teams struggle to maintain that kind of rhythm during practice. Yet somehow, the Spurs were doing it under the brightest lights imaginable. The Knicks weren't sleepwalking through possessions either. They contested shots, closed out aggressively, rotated defensively. They did many of the things coaches preach every single day. It simply didn't matter. Because San Antonio had entered that terrifying zone athletes dream about, where the basket suddenly feels twice as wide and every release leaves your fingertips with complete certainty. The lead kept growing. 8 points, 15, 20, 25, then suddenly 29. And that's when the conversation changed completely. Nobody was asking whether New York would win any. The only question was whether the Knicks could avoid complete embarrassment in front of their own fan. A 29-point playoff lead isn't just an advantage. It's a statement. It's one team looking across the court and saying, "You don't belong here tonight." The young Spurs looked fearless. Victor Wembanyama was dominating with his presence alone. De'Aaron Fox controlled the tempo. Every role player seemed ready for the moment. Meanwhile, Knicks fans sat frozen in disbelief, wondering how a dream season could unravel so quickly. But playoff basketball has a cruel sense of humor. Sometimes the moment you feel safest is the exact moment danger quietly walks through the front door. Because while San Antonio was celebrating every made shot and feeding off the energy of what looked like an unforgettable blowout, something much more dangerous was beginning to develop beneath the surface. Pressure. The pressure of protecting a massive lead. The pressure of expectations, the pressure that transforms confidence into hesitation, and all it takes for that pressure to explode is one emotional spark in the wrong place at the wrong time. The moment Wembanyama changed everything. There are moments in playoff basketball that don't show up in the box score. No statistic captures them, no advanced metric measures them, but players feel them, fans feel them, entire arenas feel them. And somewhere in the middle of this game, Plushers comfortably in control and the Knicks hanging by a thread, one of those moments arrived. Victor Wembanyama had been everything people expected him to be. Brilliant, dominant, terrifying. At 7'4" with guard skills and defensive instincts that seem almost unnatural, Wembanyama isn't just another rising star. He's viewed by many as the future face of the NBA. And on this night, he was playing like it. Every possession reminded people why executives around the league believe he can eventually redefine what basketball greatness looks like. He altered shots without jumping, handled the ball like a perimeter player, forced New York to constantly rethink how they attacked. The Spurs looked untouchable, and maybe that's exactly what they started believing. At one point during the second half, Wembanyama picked up an important foul. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was significant enough to demand composure. Instead of immediately moving on to the next play, emotions took over. Words were exchanged. Confidence became confrontation. What started as competitive, fire suddenly became personal. Now, trash talk is part of basketball. It always has been. The greatest players in NBA history have used it as fuel. Michael Jordan did it. Kobe Bryant did it. Kevin Garnett built a career around it. But there is an unwritten rule that veteran players understand better than anyone. When you're dominating inside another team's building, you don't give them a reason to believe. You don't hand emotional energy back to 20,000 people desperately searching for hope, especially not inside Madison Square Garden, because MSG isn't just another arena, it's a living organism. It feeds off emotion. One big shot can wake it up. One hustle play can ignite it. One moment of disrespect can turn it into absolute chaos. And suddenly, Knicks players who had looked defeated started standing taller. The crowd grew louder. The bench became more animated. Defensive possessions carried a different intensity. The body language shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was subtle. But playoff momentum rarely changes like an explosion. It changes like a crack forming in a dam. Tiny at first, almost invisible. Until eventually, everything breaks. Maybe Wembanyama was simply competing. Maybe he was trying to establish dominance. Maybe he was reminding everyone that he feared nobody. But experience teaches lessons that talent alone cannot. And without realizing it, the young superstar may have awakened a team that had been ready to surrender. The Knicks suddenly had something they didn't possess 20 minutes earlier. A reason to fight. A reason to believe. And once belief returns to a desperate team playing in front of its home crowd, basketball logic stops applying. Because what happened next wasn't built on strategy alone. It was built on emotion. And Madison Square Garden was about to explode. Madison Square Garden woke up. At first, the comeback did not look like history. It looked like survival. One stop, one basket, one rebound, one small burst of energy from a Knicks team that had been buried under a 29-point deficit. But inside Madison Square Garden, something started to change. The crowd that had gone silent began to rise again. A simple defensive stop suddenly sounded like a turning point. A fast break bucket made the building shake. Every Spurs miss felt heavier. Every Knicks score felt louder. San Antonio still had the lead, but the game no longer felt comfortable. That is the cruel part about protecting a huge advantage. When everything is going your way, basketball feels easy. But once the lead starts shrinking, every possession becomes pressure. Players begin checking the scoreboard, shots get rushed, passes lose confidence. The same team that looked fearless suddenly starts playing not to lose, and New York could feel it. The Knicks stopped thinking about embarrassment. They stopped playing just to make the score respectable. They began attacking like a team that smelled fear. 29 became 20. 20 became 15. 15 became 10. Madison Square Garden was alive again, and once that arena believes, the entire game changes. The Spurs still had talent. They still had the scoreboard. They still had a chance to close the door. But Jalen Brunson had seen enough. He knew San Antonio was vulnerable. And from that moment on, the comeback was no longer just possible. It was coming. Jalen Brunson entered another dimension. Jalen Brunson did not just bring the Knicks back. He dragged them back. When the game was slipping away, when the crowd was desperate for someone to believe, Brunson became the calmest person in the building. Every possession felt like a test. Could New York get one more basket? Could San Antonio survive one more stop? Could the pressure finally break someone? And every time the Knicks needed an answer, Brunson gave them one. A pull-up jumper with a defender in his face. A tough floater through traffic. A patient move to get to his favorite spot. A calm decision when everyone else was playing inside chaos. That is what separates great regular season scorers from true playoff closers. Some players need rhythm. Some need space. Some need the defense to make a mistake. Brunson needed none of that. He created his own rhythm. He created his own space. He forced the game to slow down around him. San Antonio threw bodies at him, changed angles, tried to make every touch uncomfortable. But Brunson kept attacking like the score did not scare him, and that is what made his performance so terrifying. He was not hoping the comeback would happen. He was building it one possession at a time. Every shot tightened the Spurs. Every basket brought the Garden closer to exploding. Every calm reaction from Brunson told his teammates the same thing. This game is not over. By now, San Antonio could feel the entire night slipping. The lead was shrinking, the crowd was roaring, and the ball kept finding the one player who looked completely built for the moment. The Spurs still had time to stop it. They still had enough talent to close the door, but once Brunson entered that zone, this was no longer about math. It was about nerve. And in that building, under that pressure, Jalen Brunson looked like the only man who had more nerve than fear. The pressure started crushing San Antonio. The most dangerous thing about a comeback isn't the points. It's the doubt, because doubt spreads faster than any scoring run. Earlier in the night, the Spurs had looked invincible. The ball moved effortlessly. Shooters released with confidence. Every possession carried the swagger of a team that believed nothing could go wrong. Now, everything felt different. You could see it in their faces. Possessions that once looked smooth became rushed. Open looks were second-guessed. Players hesitated for half a second longer before making a decision. And in playoff basketball, half a second feels like forever. The Knicks had nothing left to lose. The Spurs suddenly had everything to lose. That shift changes people. Protecting a massive lead sounds easy in theory. Just make the right plays. Stay composed, execute. But pressure has a way of rewriting simple instructions. A player starts thinking instead of reacting. A shooter wonders what happens if he misses. A turnover feels bigger than it should. And the scoreboard becomes impossible to ignore. The 29-point advantage that once felt untouchable had become a burden. Every Knicks basket increased the noise inside Madison Square Garden. Every defensive stop sent another wave of panic through the arena. And for the first time all night, San Antonio stopped playing freely. They started playing carefully. That's when teams become vulnerable. Because basketball rewards aggression. Fear punishes hesitation. Meanwhile, New York fed off every crack appearing in the Spurs' confidence. The bench was alive, the crowd believed, and Jalen Brunson kept delivering. The impossible no longer felt impossible. It felt inevitable. The Spurs still held the lead. They still controlled their fate. But playoff games aren't always decided by talent. Sometimes they're decided by who handles pressure better when everything begins falling apart. San Antonio was learning that lesson in real time. And the cruelest part, their biggest test was still waiting for them. Because with seconds remaining, the ball would find its way into the hands of the player they trusted most, De'Aaron Fox, a veteran guard, a proven playmaker, a player who had the chance to end the madness once and for all. All he had to do was make the simplest decision in basketball. De'Aaron Fox had the game in his hand. This is the moment that will keep San Antonio fans awake. 12 seconds left. A lead still on the scoreboard. The basketball in De'Aaron Fox's hands. For most teams, that is exactly what you want. Fox is fast, skilled, experienced, and trusted in late-game situations. He has made a career out of attacking pressure before pressure can attack him. But this time, the situation did not require greatness. It required patience. The Spurs did not need a highlight. They did not need a hero play. They did not need Fox to prove anything. All he had to do was keep the ball, run the clock, force New York to foul, and walk to the free throw line. That was it. Simple. Safe. Winning basketball. But pressure makes simple things feel complicated. Fox saw space. He attacked. In any other moment, maybe that decision works. Maybe he finishes at the rim, the Spurs survive, and everyone forgets how close this game became. But this was not any other moment. This was Madison Square Garden shaking under maximum pressure. This was a 29-point lead nearly gone. This was a young Spurs team trying desperately to escape a nightmare they created. Fox went to the rim, the layup missed, and suddenly, everything San Antonio had spent the entire night building was hanging in the air. That miss was not just a missed shot. It was an open door. New York had life. The Garden had belief, and the Spurs had no time to breathe. In one split second, the game changed from San Antonio must close this out to New York can steal this right now. That is the brutality of playoff basketball. You can dominate for most of the night. You can lead by 29. You can shoot the lights out, but if you make the wrong decision at the wrong time, the entire story can be rewritten. Fox had the game in his hand. Then it slipped away, and once the Knicks got one final chance, everyone in the building knew exactly who the ball was going to find. Jalen Brunson. 12 seconds that changed everything. The moment Fox missed, Madison Square Garden felt it. Not just the fans, the players felt it. The benches felt it. Even San Antonio felt it. Because everyone understood the same thing at the exact same time, the Knicks had one last chance. After being down 29, after looking finished, after spending the entire night climbing out of a hole that should have buried them, New York had the ball with history sitting right in front of them. And of course, it went to Jalen Brunson. There was no mystery. No need to overthink it. When everything is on the line, the ball belongs to the player who has carried you through the fire. Brunson attacked with the entire building holding its breath. The Spurs collapsed. The clock was dying. The noise was rising. Every second felt heavier than the last. He got to his spot, lifted into the shot, and released it. For one frozen moment, nobody moved. The ball hit the rim. It bounced. It did not drop cleanly, but that is where great teams are different. They do not watch the shot. They chase the result, and while every eye followed the ball, OG Anunoby was already moving toward destiny. The miss became an opportunity. The opportunity became a touch, and that touch was about to turn Madison Square Garden into pure chaos. OG Anunoby became a New York legend. OG Anunoby did not need a speech. He did not need the spot. He only needed one perfect instinct. As Brunson's shot came off the rim, the entire arena seemed frozen between heartbreak and history. One bounce could end the dream. One touch could complete the miracle. And OG was there. Right place, right time, right mindset. He followed the play instead of watching it. He crashed the glass while everyone else was reacting. And when the ball came loose, he tapped it in at the buzzer. Madison Square Garden exploded. Not loud, not excited. Exploded. Players jumped off the bench. Fans lost their minds. The Spurs stood there stunned, trying to understand how a game they controlled for so long had vanished in the final seconds. That tip-in was more than a basket. It was the final sentence of one of the wildest comebacks New York has ever seen. A 29-point deficit erased. Wembanyama's confidence turned into a lesson. Fox's decision turned into a nightmare. Brunson's brilliance turned into a legacy moment. And OG Anunoby became the man who finished the story. Around the NBA, players immediately reacted because they understood how rare that ending was. You do not see games like this often. You do not see a team survive that kind of deficit, absorb that much pressure, and still make the final winning play. For the Knicks, this was more than a win. It was proof that they cannot be buried, proof that Madison Square Garden still has magic, proof that when belief returns to New York, even the impossible starts looking real. The lessons that will define both franchises. Years from now, people won't remember every statistic from this game. They won't remember who led the first quarter in scoring or how many total rebounds each team collected. What they will remember is how this game made them feel. They will remember the disbelief of watching a 29-point lead disappear. They will remember Madison Square Garden shaking beneath thousands of fans who refused to stop believing. They will remember the image of Spurs players staring at the scoreboard, trying to understand how victory had slipped through their fingers. And they will remember Jalen Brunson standing at the center of the storm, refusing to accept defeat because this game became bigger than basketball. For New York, this wasn't simply another playoff win. It became part of the franchise's identity. Championship teams often point back to one defining moment, the night they discovered who they truly were, the night they learned they could survive impossible situations, the night doubt disappeared. The Knicks found that moment here. They learned that no deficit is too large if effort remains constant. They learned that composure can overpower panic. Most importantly, they learned that belief spreads just as quickly as fear. As long as they have leaders willing to fight possession after possession, they will always have a chance. For San Antonio, this loss carries a different kind of value. Painful lessons often become the most important teachers. Victor Wembanyama remains one of the most extraordinary talents basketball has ever seen. Nothing about this game changes his future. If anything, moments like this shape future champions. He'll learn that emotional control matters just as much as physical dominance. De'Aaron Fox will remember that sometimes the smartest play isn't the spectacular one. The young Spurs core will understand that playoff basketball punishes even the smallest mistakes. Talent opens doors. Experience teaches you how to walk through them. This defeat will hurt. It should hurt. But organizations grow through nights exactly like this. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson this game offered all of us. Life doesn't always reward the strongest team. Sometimes it rewards the team that stays together when everything appears lost. The people who continue showing up after disappointment. The individuals who choose discipline over emotion. The competitors who refuse to quit, even when logic tells them they should. Sports have always reflected life in that way. You will lose opportunities. You will make mistakes. You will experience moments you wish you could replay different. But one bad decision does not define your story. One setback does not erase your potential. What defines you is how you respond after. Do you surrender? Or do you grow? The Knicks chose belief, the Spurs gained wisdom, and millions of basketball fans were reminded why they fell in love with this game in the first place. Because sometimes the impossible happens. Sometimes heroes emerge from chaos. Sometimes an entire arena witnesses history. And sometimes the final buzzer isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new one. If this comeback left you speechless, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our community for more NBA stories filled with drama, passion, and the moments that define legacies. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and send it to another basketball fan who needs to see this unbelievable story. And now we want to hear from you. Was this the greatest playoff comeback you've ever witnessed? Type 1 if you believe this was an all-time NBA classic. Type 2 if you think another comeback still holds the crown. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let the debate begin. Until next time, never underestimate the power of belief and never leave a game early.